So I'm Gary Bolles. I'm the author of a book called The Next Rules of Work. I'm the global fellow for transformation for a group called Singularity University. And I'm the developer of 10 courses on LinkedIn Learning with about 1.5 million.
Incredible. And what is your secret to a good life, Gary?
So first off, that implies I feel I have the secret. Or a secret. I'd say I feel like I've cracked the code for myself. I don't know that it's a model that everybody else needs to follow, but I'd say finding the people and the purpose that make you feel you know why you're here. And so I don't separate them because if you just find your own purpose, but it's not connected to a community or to a range of people, I don't know that I'd call that a good life. And if you find great people, I think that's wonderful. But it's very helpful for me to know that there's things that make me feel like there's a reason to be here that are related to purpose and the kind of impact that I can have.
I recently went through the Success Principles by Jack Canfield. Have you perused that book? Oh, no. It's a really good one. 80 years of aggregated information and, keynote speaking and stuff. And one of the exercises that he has, I think his like 10 or 11th success principle is to find your purpose, to define it. And he has an exercise in there where he breaks down your purpose into pieces, right? So there's, 3 separate sections of it. And so I went through this exercise and the phrase, right? He has you come up with a phrase where my purpose is to use my passion and creativity to uplift consciousness. And so it's really fun for me. I realized like those are the 2 things that I'm into. And I love seeing when ideas come together and people collaborate and we kind of usher in the next generation of thought and process. And so that's how I found mine. Do you have, like a written stated purpose or a list of values that you follow? How do you keep your true north and remind yourself of the reason why you're here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was trained as a career counselor when I was 19 years old. I sort of bounced around in a variety of different odd jobs and dozens of odd jobs until I was in my late 20s. But one of the odd jobs was falling into the family business. So my father wrote a series of books. He became sort of the world's career counselor. And but I was trained in his methods. And what I found was that when you help people to try to define why they're here, that you can think of it as sort of a mantra or a motto or the thing that defines that. Some people find the word purpose absolutely is the center of the target. Yes, I want to know why I'm here on the planet. That's it's purpose with a capital P. And other people, that's too much. I don't know what that is, or so it's purpose with a small p. Well, so what am I doing now in my work, or and some people that's even too much. And so I often use the word meaning. What gives you meaning in your life or in your work? And so I just think that's important for listeners to be able to feel like if you don't have the capital P purpose, some people feel like the message that they're getting is, oh, well, you don't have any reason to be here on the planet then, do you? And then people who feel that they've found that, they can feel like they're sort of an exalted species. So I just want to make sure people feel like, well, you know what, this is not a bridge too far. We can each find something that resonates with us, that tells us what gives us meaning in our lives. So what gives me meaning is helping as many people as possible to become more of who they feel they are meant to be. And so that's as far as I'm concerned, there's a whole range of populations that have lots and lots of barriers to be able to become who they feel they're meant to be. And the more you can do that at scale, the more you can help a lot of individuals, but then people, in larger contexts. That's what makes me want to get up in the morning.
And as far as who you're meant to be, is it, I had John Crestani on the podcast, who's a big YouTuber. He's got, 600,000 followers or something like that. And And he told me to be the James Bond version of myself, right? So if Eric were a super, international assassin spy person, what does he wear? How what does the cut of his suit look like, and what's he doing? How's he carry himself? Do you help people overcome their roadblocks to finding, this upgraded version of themselves? And so uncover it a bit and give me the process. How does one find who they're meant to be? How do you even conceptualize that person? Is it just closing your eyes and letting your mind wander onto it? Or is it more of, jumping from dozens and dozens of odd jobs in your 20s, until you find your career? How do you get it?
So the answer is all the above. So everyone has their own path. And if you think of, I often use a sort of a thought experiment of future you. So imagine that you could wave a magic wand and suddenly a future version of you is sitting right there next to you, and you can have a conversation with them. And maybe it's a future version of you that's very, very late in life. And that future you has perfect knowledge of every decision that you've made up until now. And you have a chance to have a conversation with future you. You can talk to them and ask them, why did you make these decisions at this point? Well, nobody has that perfect knowledge. Nobody can know that, right? So what happens instead is that each of us is going through a series of phases in our lives, very predictable phases. We all start out as little bitty humans and we grow into much larger humans. And we also go through wanting different goals in life. And so the James Bond version of yourself, I think that's a great one context that might be helpful. What we found through, my father's work goes back 50 years, but we found through a wide range of processes to try to help a lot of people to be able to sort of figure out what they want to do next in their lives is that you want a pretty big toolkit, a range of tools that you can try, because some will resonate with some people and some will resonate with other people. So some people, the question about being the James Bond version of themselves will immediately spark all these thoughts and they'll get it. Like, okay, now I've got it. And others that will just leave them cold if they weren't big fans of Mr. Fleming's work. And so instead, you want to have a range of different tools that you can use. Now, some people finding that out is doing self-inventory. It's going through a process of understanding your own skills and your attributes and the things that motivate you, and then assembling all of that into something that defines the characteristics of your life. Other people, it's going off into some remote retreat and just immersing yourself in the process of just understanding more and maybe taking a few psychedelics, or maybe it's going on a guided journey with other people. But each person has a different set of options for the kind of tools that might help them to get those insights. And what I tell people all the time is you have to be benevolent to current you. You don't know all the answers that future you is going to say. And so instead, we have to experiment. We have to find that key or keys that help us to be able to determine, well, what would that good life or that better life for myself, what could that look like? And then how might I get there? What are the steps that I might take through to be able to achieve that?
So when did you do this? When did you sit down and visualize this? And what did you see? And did you achieve it? Was there anything spooky where you had visualized something and all of a sudden you were living in the house that you actually had visualized as a kid? How old were you when you started this?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So my father's process was this one of self-inventory. You sort of look at 7 aspects of yourself. It was typically in the context of work and your career, but you could use it in a lot of different ranges. So I did that a number of times when I was younger, and I can't say that I got great results. And in my case, it was because I was just too curious about too many different things and didn't really find the way to be able to sort of, narrow down the choices. The whole mindset of the illusion of choice is that people that feel like they're more generalists have too many choices. And what I found over time was to just sort of let myself go and instead be driven by finding passions, things that fascinate me, big problems that fascinate me, and then figure out, well, what's the business model that allows me to be able to pursue that passion? How do I figure out the things that really drive me right now that I might want to do next? And then, all right, now let's go figure out what's the model that will allow me to do that and to be able to have sustainable, well-paid work while I do that. And I can't say we've answered all the questions, but I feel like I've got a pretty good handle on the ball about some of those problems that I like to understand. I like to understand what's the future of work? What's the future of learning? Why is there a growing gap between haves and have-nots? And how do we try to develop solutions around that? And so I'm just lucky enough to finally have built sort of a network and a process that allows me to be able to explore those questions, those big problems, try to bring people together to develop solutions together, and to go on to the next one when I feel like I've actually had some impact.
Man, I'll take a dose of that, because one of the things that I've done this year, especially the last few months of the year, is I crave variety, right? So I love lots of things. And I also learned about myself this year that I love teaching kids jujitsu. And so finding a way to do that a significant portion of the day brings a lot of meaning to me. So I found those things out about myself. But
so that's actually, you've hit a key point, which is this thing about what you love. Now, there's a sort of yin and yang balance that, especially in American culture, that people are constantly fighting against. There's this thing called the Protestant work ethic that was developed, unfortunately, around the time of Martin Luther and became infused into the American culture. And there's this rhetoric around loving the work that you do that you might get also paid for. And the old rules of work were, oh, well, no, you didn't have to love any of that. Loving your work, I mean, come on, loving what you do, that's a luxury. And then I call the next rules of work are, well, no, actually, you don't necessarily have to give up the things that you are good at and the things that you love to do. When you can figure out what that intersection is, I call those your superpowers. You just have to be able to figure out, well, how can you have meaningful, well-paid work that comes with that? And what a lot of people do is they default to those old rules and a lot of the permission that they should be giving themselves to go and experiment and try something new so that they can actually develop that sort of next approach to their work or their lives. They bungee cord back to where it's safe, to what they've done before. And then they say, oh, no, you don't have to love your work. And especially older people nowadays tell young people this whole thing about loving your work is just a big mistake. So you give yourself permission to find out that you love teaching jujitsu to kids. Then the next permission is to figure out, well, how can I bake more of that into my life?
Yeah, that one's a head scratcher for me, because it doesn't pay particularly well.
No.
I have, talking about the default in the slingshot back, I've almost written it off as it's incapable of doing so, right? It's not something that I can support my family on.
Okay, but here's the thing: is it's all about mindset, right? So in my book, I talk about mindset, skill set, and tool set. Mindset is the way that we approach problems. Skill set is our ability to channel our human energy. And tool set are the techniques and the technologies that we use to be able to achieve the things we want to achieve, whether it's cleaning a dirty floor or solving a major world problem, right? So mindset, skill set, and tool set. And so the mindset that I encourage often when we think about these options in our lives is a portfolio of work, right? So what ends up happening is, especially if you're fascinated by lots of different things, you like variety. I'm a variety junkie. And so you have these different elements in your life. And in the past, you might have had to choose. No, this thing can't support my family, therefore I can have none of it in my life. But what I encourage people to do all the time is to, well, think of those different building blocks and then figure out how could that one element, how could you get more of it? I don't mean like quit everything else and just teach jujitsu to kids, but how can you get more of it? And then eventually what many people find is that they can actually assemble the building blocks. You can almost think of it as a Venn diagram. And the example that I use all the time is, if in the past you were fascinated by agriculture, you liked playing in the garden, you were fascinated by engineering, you took apart the family vacuum and you put it back together, and you were fascinated by space. This guy named Musk is doing all these satellites and you just think that's awesome. In the past, you would have had to, if you actually wanted to do work, you'd have to pick one and you just go get a degree in one and then you forget the others. But agriculture, engineering, and space. John Deere, the tractor company, has a new tractor that is autonomous and is guided by satellites. So they want every single kid on the planet that is fascinated by those three things. And so That's what a portfolio of work is. It's finding these building blocks of the different things that fascinate you. And then at different points in our lives, maybe you can't do a lot of teaching jujitsu to kids right now, but over time, it may be that you find that, hey, there's a podcast on teaching jujitsu to kids, and that actually could get a huge following. Or there's all sorts of different elements that you might be able to bake more into your life, so long as you
give myself permission today. Here I am. I kept pushing against myself because every mentor and every smart person that I talked to was like, Eric, you need to focus on one thing at a time. And I recently let that go because it was a nexus of focus of things that I was working on. They all kind of supported each other, and they were two of them were dependent on one in particular. And that was the agency that supports my podcast and my clients and one of my other businesses, right? So I had to make sure that I served those things. And they say that, no man can serve two masters, but I finally got to the point where the stress of trying to focus on one thing was more detrimental than just buckling down and just doing all of the things and focusing deep work on them instead of bouncing from one thing to another, right? One day I can say all of it's going to be on one business, or 1 week is going to be all on one business, rather than trying to go from thing to thing to thing each day. So in the process of me dialing in my variety and figuring out how it works for my life, I was able to create this functional nexus for myself that went ahead and supported all those projects without burning me out.
So I think that's a brilliant process to go through, because what you want, again, it comes back to permission. So yes, in some cases, especially generalists or people with lots of different interests, it can be a challenge because there's so many bright, shiny objects and you want to chase them all down. And then it's very difficult to be able to achieve your goals, to set goals and achieve them. And so instead, I say it's an order of prioritize. It's a process of prioritizing, right? It doesn't mean that you don't teach jujitsu to kids at all. What it means is that you have this regular process of looking at your life and your work and what you're trying to accomplish. If you are achieving your goals, you're doing the right thing. It's only when you're not achieving your goals that you need to hack the process. And so it's very important to be thinking about this sort of balance of the things that you're doing today and the long-term process, the long-term planning of where you want to be tomorrow. My friend John Hagel, the management theorist, calls this zoom in and zoom out. So zoom in is, what am I doing today? How do I ever prioritize my time? But zoom out is, what do I want to make sure I'm baking more and more into my life as I go forward? And so when you were talking about just sort of figure out how you balance those things and what that process is, whether it's focus for a thing on a week or it's how do you break up your day, the major deliverable is just making sure you're achieving your goals. And if you're not, then trying new techniques, trying new approaches, take on a coach, find other people to help you to be able to hack that process so you can prioritize and have the results that you want, achieving your goals.
I love that. Gary, where can everyone find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, everywhere on LinkedIn. Bolles, Bolles on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks, Eric.
This has been the Pulse Ox podcast. Please, if you found this episode valuable, give us a like on Spotify and share it with a friend.